Hi, Alison. Thank you very much for joining us today in our series of Women in Tech and Women in Data interviews. Do you want to start off just by introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Alison Williams. I'm the global head of data at dunnhumby. We're a customer-centric data science company. Essentially, I'm accountable for all of the data services that we provide to our clients and across the globe. And that kind of falls into two buckets. Some of the services are things that we provide to our internal users to help them deliver our products and services to clients. So, for example, we've got a really big data engineering function that build data solutions that process our clients' data. We've got a deployment project management team that help roll out all of our products and services. We've got data SMEs, subject matter experts that really understand our products and services and the types of data they need to consume so we can create data requirements for when we're working with clients. And then the other bucket are teams that work directly with clients. So we've got a technical account management function, which covers some of the kind of traditional TAM role, but is very focused on data. The nature of what we do at dunnhumby, it's a huge part of most people's roles, but our TAM team really work directly with clients to understand what data they've got, and how to make it available to dunnhumby so we can process it and make it available to our analysts, our data scientists, and our products and services. And then we've also got a data consulting group that work directly with clients on their data strategy. So we know that we've got a huge amount of expertise and experience within dunnhumby of working with customer data. So we want to make that available to our clients so they can really build their own data strategy and their own data capability within their business. And then we have a small function which looks after kind of thinking about the future and what would our future data propositions and data services be. So it's quite a big team. It's with lots of different kind of functions and activities, and it's a great role. There's lots of variety and never a dull moment.
Brilliant. Yeah, it sounds exciting. Obviously, like you said, there's a lot going on, both internally and externally and customer facing. I know you've been at dunnhumby for quite a while, and I think in fact your career started there, and then you had a move and you went back. Do you want to just sort of tell us about your career path and how you started out in this field and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I don't think I've got a particularly traditional story to tell. In terms of education, I was very much a humanities student. I studied modern political and economic history at uni, so nothing to do with data or science, which is now quite unusual. And when I graduated, I was really looking for a graduate scheme, a company that would value my kind of broad education and my approach and the kind of, I guess, what you might call softer skills, rather than because I didn't really have a sort of vocational qualification. And I came across dunnhumby and I was really interested in the way that they were so focused on the impact that the business has and clients have on customers and on customers' day-to-day lives. And it was a very small company at that point. It was probably about a tenth of the size it is now. It was only in the UK and the US. And they did a graduate scheme. So I joined that, and my first role was as a data engineer. So I was very much thrown in the deep end, having no technical background.
Yeah.
I had a kind of crash course in coding. We used base SAS at that point, so it didn't even have like a nice UI to interface with. It was very much learning kind of how to code, which was a brilliant foundation because it meant I really understood from the ground up, how do we use and analyze and process data? How do we build our data solutions and our data processes? Right from the kind of the basics. So I did that for a couple of years, and then, as you mentioned, I did leave dunnhumby. I went to work for a charity, and the rationale behind this was I had always had the ambition to work in public sector or charity sector. And I really felt that I wanted to be able to contribute to to something that would impact society and you know, a good cause. There were lots of things I felt very passionately about, and
Yeah.
I really wanted to be able to contribute towards those. So I took a role in a charity, and I worked there for just over a year and a half, about 2 years. And what I actually found was, although it gave me that kind of sense of, you know, what I was contributing to, I didn't have the same opportunities I'd experienced at dunnhumby in terms of growth and taking on responsibilities and developing my skill set and growing my career. So I decided to come back to dunnhumby. And I did a lot of work separately within charity sector. So I volunteered at weekends. I worked for um, a child support line called Childline, a listening service for young people. So I tried to fulfill that through kind of my free time. And then work-wise, I found the environment of dunnhumby, working in a company that was going through a huge amount of growth and expansion at the time, was really exciting and gave me that opportunity to really kind of to grow and take on a lot more responsibility. So I came back. I worked on a big project around international expansion. We were going from being in 2 countries to another 11 countries. So we suddenly had to take solutions that we developed over years quite organically and package them up and deploy them within a couple of months. So that was a huge challenge, really exciting.
Yeah.
And then that kind of led me onto more of a client-facing role where I was using my background in data, but to start working directly with clients and understand kind of what data they've got and how could we use it. So it was the kind of the early version of the technical account management role that I described earlier. And I kind of moved around the business focusing on different areas. So I did a role focused on our Asia business, which was really interesting because we were starting to work with China, and that threw up a whole load of new kind of considerations around data security and the regulations there, and what we could and couldn't do with things like cloud hosting outside of China. So it was a really interesting time. I worked on our media business. We had acquired a retargeting programmatic business. So we were looking at how do we integrate that capability, and suddenly we had a whole new lot of data, like a new type of data we'd never really worked with before to explore. And then I actually relocated over to Chicago to run our North America data team, which was a brilliant experience. Wonderful to have the opportunity to live in a different country and experience a different city and a different culture. And also work-wise, it was really different from what I'd done before. We were pursuing a lot of new business. We were working with lots of retailers across the country, whereas a lot of my experience in the past had been with one big dominating retailer that we were working with in one country, for example Tesco in the UK. So it was really interesting to work on kind of a very different portfolio of clients. And then the kind of the last role I did in Chicago, I set up our data consulting business. So as I mentioned earlier, I recognised the opportunity to really share the expertise and the experience that we had within our data team with our clients. We recognized over the last 10 years there's been a huge shift with a lot of companies, including mainly retailers that we work with, that rather than outsourcing all of their data needs and data processing and data analytics, they wanted to build that capability within their own business. So we're perfectly placed to help them do that because we've got experience of doing it many times in different regions and different types of retail business. So I set up the data consulting business so we could actually go out and help clients with their own data capability and strategy. And then I'll take a pause. I took a year off parental leave. I had my son Adam, and I was still in Chicago actually, so we had him over there. And then I took a year off, and then I moved back to the UK, back to London. And when I returned, I was offered my manager's job. My manager was moving on to do something else, so I was offered a new role, which is the role I'm in now, global head of data. Which essentially was a promotion. So I was moving from kind of running one function to running the data team, which included that data consulting function and the other areas I've described. So I came back. I've been doing that for the last 2 years. It's been an interesting time to be doing a global role. Yeah, and managing a big team has been incredibly rewarding, but incredibly stressful as well through pandemic. But it's a brilliant team, so the people have definitely kept me going.
It's an amazing career and really interesting, and it's interesting that you've done so much within dunnhumby, and the opportunity to go to America, come back, get the promotion, etc., etc. And you've done obviously all the other bits in the business in between. And you studied history at university. And that's what's really interesting from my perspective. Obviously, we're doing this series of interviews for women in tech because we're trying to promote that next generation to get involved. Perhaps there's a history student out there that wants to do what you've done. I mean, what would your advice be to that next generation, but also to your younger self as well, given your experience?
I think probably something that I've really reflected on the last few years is that I found, my background and my interests and my approach to things, the way I think about things, tends to be quite different from most of the people around me in my industry. So when I'm in discussions or in meetings or part of teams, I tend to be the person thinking about things in a slightly different way. So, for example, I'm not an attention to detail person, which is quite unusual in a data and a tech space. What really motivates me is people, and that comes out both in terms of managing people and developing people, but also what motivates me about my day job is the impact that how I'm having on customers when they're in retail stores and they're having a better experience because of what dunnhumby do and what we do with our clients. So it's really the kind of people element, and that's very different from a lot of people around me who are really motivated and excited by technology and by science and by by the detail of it. And so for a long time in my career, I was very self-conscious and really insecure about that difference. And so there were definitely periods in my career where I felt that I should be emulating the people around me and especially the people above me, the role models I had that seemed very different from me. I should be more like them. And what I've realized actually is the success I've had in my career is because I bring a different approach and a different perspective, and I can challenge things from a different way, and ultimately that leads to a different discussion and hopefully a more robust decision, or a more robust kind of output. And so what I would really say is, rather than question your differences and be kind of conscious of those, embrace them and find the way that you can add value because of those differences, and don't be insecure if you feel and look different from everyone in the room. That's a real positive. That's at the heart of all the research we see around diversity and inclusion, that actually having that diverse perspective and background and thought process is really valuable and leads to better output. So recognize that value and embrace it. Don't try and kind of squash it.
I think that's excellent advice, and so important, in the discussion we're having. If you're doing something that you're passionate about or that you enjoy, it doesn't matter about your peers around you or superiors. If you want to do something and you can add value, like you say, embrace your differences and use them to your advantage. It'd be a very boring business world if everybody was exactly the same.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's brilliant. You mentioned there sort of the people around you, and people you perhaps felt you had to emulate, both colleagues and superiors. And sort of moving along from that slightly, who has helped shape your career? Who's been your biggest support?
I think yeah, there's probably a few different kind of individuals and groups. The first one, from a very kind of work professional perspective, I described when I came back to dunnhumby from being in the charity sector, that I was working on this big project around international expansion. And as part of that, I was I was still kind of fairly junior, but because of the role I was playing, I ended up having a lot of exposure to the leadership team that was running that project and running that area of the business. And that was the first time that I had real exposure to a really high functioning, really productive leadership team, and also a very diverse team. There was a lot of different personalities, different backgrounds, and different expertise. There was people that were incredibly commercially focused, and then people that were incredibly technically experienced and really understood data science and the kind of technicalities of that. So there was and everything in between.
Mhm.
And I think that having that exposure and being kind of on able to work with that team had a really big impact on me. I learned a huge amount from those people. There was there were incredible role models, and thankfully there were a couple of really strong female leaders in that team as well. Anthea Oon, who ran our science and insight business, and a woman called Sarah Rana Morton, who was more on the commercial side. They were really big influences and role models for me. And also, it wasn't just kind of being able to see them and be exposed to that. They were actually hugely supportive of me, and really gave me a lot of confidence to kind of to recognize what I was able to do and what I was successful in. And in particular, there was the manager of that team at the time, a guy called Mark Hines. He was incredibly supportive of me personally. He gave me a lot of coaching, and he gave me a lot of opportunities as well. There was one particular point where a more senior role came up, and it hadn't even occurred to me to apply for it. And he called me into his office. It sounds very old-fashioned now, talking about offices and we're all
Yeah.
open plan and all working from home. But he called me into his office and said, I hope you're going to apply for this role. And it hadn't even occurred to me to apply for this. I wasn't ready. I was too junior. I didn't have the experience. And he really encouraged me and pushed me to apply for it. And I got the role, and it gave me a great experience, and was another kind of step in my career path. And then other kind of people or groups, a huge cliche, but my partner Richard has
Yeah.
been an unwavering supporter through my whole career. The points that it's really made a big impact was moving to Chicago. He didn't think twice about giving up his job and his career to move over there and let me try something new and have that experience. And he was incredibly supportive through that process. And then most recently, with returning to work after parental leave and having a very different home life, having a young child to look after, and choosing to go back part time, and all the kind of the pressures that comes with that. Taking a senior role part time is can be incredibly difficult, and has been incredibly difficult at points. And he genuinely is there to support me and help me and make sure that I'm able to do my job and have the time to do that, and not worry about nursery pickups or or being flexible. Very early on, when I came back into my role, when we could still travel, I went over to India because I manage a big team in Gurgaon, just outside Delhi. So I needed to take a trip over there and meet people. And our son was quite young, and there was no question around the fact that I could go, and I didn't have to worry about anything to do with that. So he's been a massive impact on my success. And then the last group I would call out is I've got a really good group of female friends. There's four of them, so five of us. That group has had a really big impact on me on the last few years in terms of their support, but also they're all incredibly smart, talented, successful women, and they have really helped educate me and give me different perspectives on situations I found myself in, particularly around being a woman in a very male dominated industry, being a senior woman, being a woman who's working part time and has a family in a senior role. Those scenarios aren't all that common. And so I've faced lots of challenges that I have not faced before, and they've been a brilliant support network and really helped educate me and make me think about things differently and question things, and get me through kind of some of those challenges. So that they've had a really big impact.
Amazing. And yeah, it sounds like you've had the support that you've needed. And in such a a varied career in terms of the roles you've done within dunnhumby, but within one business, what would you say has been your career defining moment or your biggest achievement to date?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. They're probably two different things, actually, career defining and biggest achievement. I think one of the career defining moments was early on. It was that period that I described earlier around moving to the charity sector. And really, what that helped me understand was what is important to me when I'm looking for a role and an organization. And I went into that role thinking that if I was contributing to a good cause, that was my number one motivation, and that was really the only thing that mattered. And what I realized was that it wasn't, and that yes, that's important to me, but day to day, having a role that is challenging and that it gives me opportunities to learn, and that I'm surrounded by people that are much more experienced than me that I can learn from, and that I'm given lots of opportunity to take on more responsibility. All of that is actually what really motivates me day to day. Although it was early on, and I mean, it was probably quite fortunate that it was early on in my career, because it really helped me understand what was important to me, and what motivated me. That, I think, that was probably the one of the most important. And then again, the kind of coming back to what we were just talking about coming into a role with a young child, and um, that was probably, I would say, probably one of my biggest achievements in terms of managing a huge amount of change. Like, I moved countries, I had a new boss, I had a new role, I was being promoted, I had a very different home life with a young child, I was going part-time. All of that stuff was very overwhelming. But I took it on, and I've been doing that role for 2 years. I think I've been doing a good job. Hopefully, everyone's, there's all good feedback. And I think having got over all that change and been successful in my role, I feel like that's probably one of my biggest achievements.